Ago.
Amen.
Ago.
Amen.
Ago.
Amen.
Also the bedrooms, Nancy bedrooms, Radikofu bedrooms, Ogu bedrooms, Eshu bedrooms, Ogu bedrooms, Nanakumi bedrooms, Nana Sobo to pray bedrooms, Tigare bedrooms, Inkote bedrooms, Nana Achidan bedrooms, Nana Amogeni bedrooms, Nana Yao Paradini Zulu bedrooms, Nana Ikuyo Parabia bedrooms, Abasun bedrooms, Insamanko bedrooms, Australia Pong, Yankupong, Asasa Fiwa, Numoe, Bahedano, Nae, 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 okay, that girl, she said, Oduno Duna, Kingi King, Amalobi Amalo, Nikole Hemodanu, Nakole Abuho, Nahohu Hemodanu, Kejelangma, Keyak Veshulao, Wojifeni Ojeme, Nyefe Nyeba Hedanyena, Washemoko, Washimoko, Ahejemakoyo, Shinopon. We ask the gods and the ancestors to bless this gathering today. We ask you to bless all those who have prepared this function for us. We ask that you give everyone strength, understanding, an open heart, an open mind, and we ask that you bring love to this gathering today. We ask that you help us to move forward, to make the future a good one for all of us. We ask that you keep us strong in body, mind, and spirit. We ask that you give us the strength of our ancestors and allow us to lean on our history here in the Americas and in Africa. Help us to be knowledgeable in all that pertains to us and protect us from all that is going on around us. Help us to focus on what is important to us and to our community and to our families. We ask that you protect us all, and we ask that you heal all those who couldn't make it today because of illness. Aye Mumina, Hejale, Hewale, Kewala, Sejale, Ahabo.
I would like to take this time to welcome you to Akom Kese 2018. Akwaba. This event was started 3 years ago to bring together the Akan community in America on an annual basis to learn from one another and to socialize. Now, when I say the Akan community, I'm speaking of the spiritual sons and daughters of Nana Yao Paradini Zulu and Nana Akuya Parabia. Akom Kese is designed so that the practitioners of Akan culture can share their experience of living the culture in America. It is designed so that we can motivate each other to be our better selves. It is designed to help us to raise our children in understanding that they are not alone. It is designed to be a resource. It is designed to let you know that someone has your back and your interest. Our people have experienced a great deal of trauma because of slavery, and we're still suffering its effect. I realize we have much work to counter its effect, but we are on the path of healing ourselves through understanding and practicing our traditions. So I'm happy to see so many of you supporting this event. This is a wonderful accomplishment, and I congratulate you. Please give yourself a round of applause. I welcome your help and support in continuing to build. I would love to establish an official organization and invite all to participate. The organization will be secular in nature and deal with the traditions and tenets of Akom culture. So please stay tuned, more is to come. I will be remiss not to thank my beautiful wife, Andrea Moa. She's out at the registration desk. And my children, Asha, Naya, and Kwasi. Where's Kwasi? Kwasi's back there at the camera. Akoshua, Naya is here, and then my other daughter's on the table for their continued support. So as you know, family is important in helping you to do things, and although you might argue and disagree and have your things, family is family at the end of the day. So I also want to give a special thank you to Akoshua Bakan Yisrael. For her support. She's the curator of the Akom Kese Facebook, and she's the editor-in-chief for Akom Kese newsletter. She is dedicated and deserves a great deal of credit for what you see here today. She always has a sunny disposition, and it has been a pleasure working with you. Thank you, Akoshua. So, go to school, and not to knock any other thing, I like to study and learn things, and we all have studied to some degree and learned things to enhance ourselves and our personalities. The Akom culture for us, in many respects, is a foreign entity because we adopted Akom culture. We came across this in our lives, and we said this is for us, and we started studying it and said, yes, I want to apply these principles to my life, and in a way of recapturing our ancestry, because it's been stolen from us, it's been taken from us. We were forcefully brought to this land, and the European conquerors told us, this is your culture now. So for years, many of us have been studying our culture and incorporating those principles into our lives in order so that we can live a different or a more fulfilling life. So we will never, quote unquote, be African in the true African sense because we didn't grow up in Africa. We have our own experiences here in America, and those things should not be discounted. We are African Americans, Black Americans, however you want to address it. So those experiences are crucial to our identity as a people and the experiences that we've had. So although we adopt African culture and we live by those principles, I also want us to be cognizant of the fact that we grew up here in America. We have our own experiences. We have our own culture to some degree in terms of the things that we've done here. You take a person from Africa and bring them to America, it's a total different thing. They see things differently. They understand different things. We're used to hot water and running. I don't think nobody here want to go to Africa and be fetching water. We used to having electricity, and this is not a knock. This is just a fact, a statement of fact in terms of our experiences and the things that we've been accustomed to. So, the first speaker that I'm bringing here is a historian. He teaches at Queensborough Community College and in the City University of New York. And I had a real interesting conversation with him in terms of connecting the historical piece of what we do to us here in America. We call ourselves Akoms in America, but we're really Akoms in America through our spiritual connections. So some of us are really Akoms in America because their mothers were Akom and they were born into that lineage. So we take it a little different approach, and so I want to have a historian come in here and talk about that connection from Africa, those Akoms, and if you go to the logs, you'll see there actually were Akom people who were enslaved that were brought here, etc., etc. But I'm not going to steal the thunder. I'm going to let the presenter do that. Alright, so our presenter is Dr. Kwasi Konadu, who's a professor of history at the City University of New York. He has conducted extensive archival and field research in West Africa, Europe, Brazil, and the Caribbean Basin and North America. And much of his writings focus on African diasporic histories. He is the author of the Indigenous Medicine and Knowledge in the African Society 2007, A View from East, Education and Cultural Nationalism 2009, The Akom Diaspora in the Americas, Oxford University Press 2010, The Akom People, a documentary reader, 2 volumes, 2013 to 2015, with Clifford Campbell. The Ghana Reader, History, Cultural Politics, Duke University Press 2016, and Our Way in the Part of the World, Biography of the African Community, Culture, and Nation, Duke University Press 2018. So as you can see, this brother's been busy. Dr. Konadu is also the founding director of a not-for-profit educational publishing group, Diasporic African Press Incorporated. So please, let's provide him with a round welcome of applause. And we'll turn it over to you, brother.
Well, greetings, everyone. I thank Brother Kwasi and certainly all of you for allowing me a few moments of your time in this very important occasion. So, I am a historian, and the reason why I wear these things is because of all the work in the archives over the years. What I want to do with you all this morning is to take hopefully no more than about 45 minutes to an hour, and I'll try to keep it lively as possible. Certainly want to put you to sleep. The presentation is twofold. The first half, I want to focus on the conceptual or ontological world from which healers work, that is, what they reference and how they translate that world into social practice, therapeutic practice. And I want to start there because when I was working on the Akom Diaspora book in the Americas, and some of you may be aware of that book, I came across this very old drum text. It's a text that's played on the atumpine drum. In a moment, I'll share with you some of that music. So I have some music and videos for you. And the text is one that you may have heard before. It's very familiar. It goes something like this. Asutra akwain traso obeni wine. Asutra akwain traso obeni wine. The river crosses the path crosses the river. Which one is the elder? Essentially, which ones came first? And in this paradox, in this riddle, is the matrix for Akom society, because something had to come first. And then there's the answer in the following stanza. The idea that, didn't we go encounter the river? And it says, Esu tano, krong tano, brefia tano, asu brekete. Sacred tano. Brekete is a praise name, Marnier, for tano, also known as Takura, in Tano Kwasi. And in that drum text, and it's a longer, I can say it for you, but a longer text, but essentially, the first portion is similar to a jazz standard in that there are many renditions of it, but those stanzas are fixed. They don't change. And in that riddle, which came first, the path or the river to the path? The answer is that the river came first, and then humans created a path to meet the river. In other words, this idea of a conceptual or divine order came first. And then humans created a path to meet the river that was already there. The question and the answer is in that drum text. And so that's why I want to spend a few minutes on this ontological world first. And then we get into some of the social histories that are crucial to particularly those of us in the American diaspora. And so my latest book focuses on a healer named Nana Kofi Donko. And Nana Kwajo and I and certainly we met in Techima, I think 2011. Yeah, and he was in the compound of Nana Kofi Donko. Then Nana Kofi Donko's nephew, Nana Yao Mensah, who was since transitioned, he passed away, was the one in charge. But this healer, the book tells the story of this healer, his family, of Techima and of Ghana over the last 2 centuries. And I call it a communitography, meaning that I'm not interested in individual life story, but rather the story of an entire community over these centuries. So that's coming out end of the year, this year. So I want to start with this healer that I've come to know something about. So Kofi Donko was a Bono healer born around 1913. And he lived in Techima, though he was born in the Nkuranza town of Akom Kese. In 1913, Robert Rattray, some of you know Rattray, right? Some of you, we must know Rattray. Robert Rattray, a Scottishman, he entered the world of colonial anthropology that same year, at a time when anthropology was fixated on knowing something about people's culture from inside out so as to better manage and control them. This is the core of anthropology, that Europeans don't study other Europeans, they study other people, so as to know their language, their customs, their traditions, so as to better corral them in a colonial order. But Rattray is a little bit different. He mastered languages, a number of African languages, including Asante Tree. And while working in Asante, Rattray discovered that the source of Asante and Akan belief was not in Kumasi, it was in the Techiman region. And so he went searching for this spiritual force called Takura or Tanu. And so in this trek towards Techiman, actually through Techiman region, and towards Tanu, he encounters the Busumfie of Takura and Tanabuasi. Tanabuasi is not only a town, it's also a cave, which I'll show you an image of in a moment, where the sort of original shrine of Takura is located, sort of underground. And I'll show you an image of that. Kofi Donko had a Tano Busum called Asabonte Kwabena. And there's an Asabonte at Tanoso, literally on the Tano River, the village. And so what I want to do, I want to use a libation text from Kofi Donko as our guide through this world of human and spiritual forces, conceptual world that I referenced a moment ago. This is a photo of Kofi Donko to my left, your right. He's in the same compound to which we met some years ago. And the compound is called Konfo Krom, that is Healer's town, Healer's village. In the first text, the first part, because I've divided the libation text into 5 sequential parts. This is the first stanza. The first stanza, Kofi Donko invokes Nana Kwajo Samai, or Samai Kwajo. This happened to be his uncle and the healer for the Busum which he inherited. This is his grandfather, Kwajo Busu. And I want to start there because this is one of the first categories of spiritual forces, the ancestors that I think a number of you invoked early on in the previous presentation. And these ancestors, of course, the term that is most familiar to us is the word Samain, as in Samainfo, and Asamando. Samain has the linguistic root meaning, usually this particular root is crucial to this indeterminate abode called Asamando. Asamando, according to a group of healers interviewed in the early 20th century, means, quote, there is no more town. No town exists here anymore. And this is where the ancestors go. The term Samain also includes a cluster of ancestors which fall into about 4 categories. The first is Asamaimpa, or the good-natured ancestors, who experience a natural death en route to Asamando, the place where the ancestors dwell. The next category is the Asamain Trinchen, and they linger near the earth as ineligible candidates for Asamando due to their unethical existence. And then there's the acutely negative Asamain Boni, or Otafo, lingering spirit, that experience a violent death or improper burial, and consequently, they are boldly and aggressively wander about. As we all know, most of us know, death by suicide is considered culturally unacceptable in Akom culture and debars the deceased person from Asamando. Such spirits return to the human world as Otafu Sasa, individuals incarnate with a cruel or homicidal character, leading to the same end. Finally, there's a category which some of you invoked early on, Nananon Nsamanfo, singular Nanasamai, as in Nanasamai Kwajo. These are the evolved ancestors. In a sense, they have achieved their life mission, or Shibya. And they have transitioned across the water or up a hill to Asamando. There's a number of stories about how one gets to Asamando. Usually it's across the water where one goes to a sort of this terminus, and they enter on a raft or a barge, and they're floated across to Asamando. Other stories indicate climbing up a hill to get to Asamando. No one knows, so we can't be sure which one is it. And I'm sure you don't want to find out. And thus, these are the ones that are invoked during libation for the provision of blessings, inshira, children, prosperity, health, healing, and long life. The Nanon Samafo are therefore the ones that are targeted for invocation. And I found a rare video of Rattray, who videoed an Adai ancestral festival at the town of Lake Busumtree in 1923. And I want to play this for you. Now, this is a time before sound, so you just have to use your visual sense. We'll spend about 2 minutes or so. Let's see here. Here we go. Again, this video was recorded 1922, this Adai ceremony. And at the ceremony, Rattray recorded libation, initiated with the words, quote, "Minananom Smanfo Eneya Wukwedai," which he translated as, "My spirit ancestor today is Wednesday Adai." And this is the video. You can see the folks who are seated. You can see the large umbrellas. You can see soon, you see the drumming. And this is vintage footage, folks, 1922. And as some of you know, Lake Busumtree, or Busumtree, the town, is south of Kumasi. It's about maybe, 45-minute drive or so, depending upon the road conditions, which some of you also know very well. Oh, thank you. Little cameo, right? And of course, these are the ancestral stools, the blackened stools. I'll show you more a little later. I know. But I was given a time limit, so I want to make sure I get these. So, festivals like these, ceremonies like these, were also recorded by Basel missionaries, Swiss missionaries, of course, German-speaking missionaries, who studied and published literature in the Akan Tree language. And they too recorded another libation, this time by an Akomfo named Kwame Dapa of Insuta, who announced, quote, "Today is a..." Thank you. Who announced, "Today is Adai. Spirits of the ancestors come and receive palm wine and drink." But why venerate the deceased? Basel missionary Owusu asked several healers. The healers responded this way, quote, "The reason why we have to serve the deceased is the following. When the dead person was living, he was my father or she my mother. During his or her life, I honored him or her very much and appreciated him or her. Now he or she has died. I have to present the same veneration to his or her spirit. If I have palm wine and food, I have to also give it to him or her, end quote. And these are folks who were interviewed by the Basin missionaries, again, at the turn of the 20th century. So these are coming from the Akom people's mouth, who are the, amongst these missionaries, particularly in Akwiapem, but as some of you know, the Basin missionaries were a missionary society that was all over what is now the southern half of Ghana. In fact, the Basin missionary established a mission station in Nkranza, not far from Kofi Donko's home of Kumsu Dumasi, the village of Kumsu Dumasi, around the time of 1913. And so the Basin missionaries were also crucial in actually learning the language. Of course, many of you know the most important and still most valuable dictionary is by Christalla. Christalla, of course, being this German Basin missionary who was helped by a number of African linguists and informants. And so in the second text of Kofi Donko, he makes a plea for protection in exchange for libations of palm wine and liquor, among other offerings. And this explains the enlarged net that ancestry casts over family and community. But the petition that Kofi Donko makes also adheres to observation made by these evangelists of the Basin mission. The missionaries reckon this, quote, the local person senses himself from the cradle to the grave under the influence of good and bad spirits, and spiritual powers, whose hostile attitude he will try to mitigate through sacrificial offerings and prayers, and whose protection and assistance he's seeking to win. Now, if this world of Asamando is a solar system, then there exists a galaxy of spiritual forces. The first of which, I think someone mentioned earlier, is the well-known Mortia. That is the short creatures. And Moa can mean everywhere from microorganisms to a large creature. So Mortia, literally short creatures, these are citizens of the tropical dense forest, occupants of the sacred Odum tree, possessing a backward feet with the heels turned toward the front, a high-pitched voice, which I don't have, an appetite for bananas, and jovial with children. And for the healer, an unrivaled knowledge of plant medicines. The Mortia are crucial because they are the ones who frequent the dense forest, and therefore they know the medicines in the forest. And so the Mortia also have their own particular healers, but like any two, they can be an asset or troublesome. The second cast member is Sasabonsam, or Kasampre, a fearsome creature of the dense forest. Rattray defines Sasa as, quote, the spirit surviving after death, and Bonsam as, quote, the male witch. However, Sasa is the negative or ill-reconciled spirit of a deceased creature, able to cause harm, while Bonsam is the acute force of malevolence that can be used to harm or heal by attacking the very antisocial forces it represents. In other words, if you want to catch a criminal, use another criminal. In short, Sasa Bonsam is a spirit dweller of the dense forest that assumes the form of a creature which may capture or endanger humans, but which also infiltrates and arrests destructive forces, such as the Obai-4, which will be our next cast member. For these reasons, the forest-dwelling Akom peoples have great respect for Sasa Bonsam and the Mortia. And of course, finally, in our cast of these non-human forces are the Obai-4, one who uses Bai. Often characterized as witchcraft, Bai is an undetermined power shaped by the user's intent, producing a constructive or adverse outcome for users and recipients which they view differently. Bai is a neutral force or power through which individuals serve their community or fracture them. Healers are the ones who have to weigh the bounds have to weigh their competencies against what the client wants and the public good. Healers argue Bai is imbued with the capacity for constructive ends, but intentionality shapes Bai into a destructive force. Ultimately, the origin and uses of Bai involve or devolve into complex claims around social inclusion and exclusion. In other words, those who are Obai-4 are often excluded into their own villages, into their own sort of asylums, because of the power or unrestrained power and force which they wield. And so Bai has that ability whereby essentially it is the hammer that can use to build a house, or it's the hammer that can destroy the house. So Bai in itself is a neutral force, much like the others, the Motia, neutral forces that can go either direction. And Bai is, as we'll see a little bit later in this discussion, Bai is the root term for the term Obia, as in obey. We'll talk about that a little more. In this stanza, which is the third among which the healer has given us, Healer Kofi Donko, is about the spiritual forces located in nature. And here, his petition seems to be elevated to a larger, more powerful court of appeals, where most healers and townspeople view these spiritual forces as parcels of a cosmic force. Some call this force God, but there were significant differences between the God idea and conceptions Kofi Donko had in mind. So in this third stanza of the libation text, he says in Yankopon, which I substituted with the term God, take this drink, Asasiya, take this drink. By the way, this is an English translation that was not my own. This was recorded by another researcher, but I thought it was useful for us to at least have a text to go through sort of step by step. That said, what are we to make of this Almighty God, this earth, and the spiritual forces that headline stanza 3? There's actually an order to this list, a sort of hierarchy of powers organized by the principle of seniority. The Basel missionaries collected ethnographic material in Akwiapim, where stories of God, creation, and about the origins of Abasum took priority. In one story that I'll share with you, the missionaries were told, quote, I want you to listen carefully here, men. When God created the world, he created a woman first, and then a man. He started it on Saturday and created until Friday all things. But on Saturday, he did not create anything. First, he created human beings and brought them to the world. Then he created trees and stones and all other things, end quote. Having contemplated, quote, the act of creating the appointed Abusum as his interpreted representative on earth, thus the creation was complete, end quote. Now it's crucial, and we'll come back to this sequence of creation, which these Basel missionaries recorded in the early 20th century from these Akan informants in Akwiapim, but also Akropong and other portions where the missionaries were stationed. Among the missionaries, there was a teacher named Owusu, and he asked this, what do you know about God, the Creator? The healers responded, we know that Yankopong exists. We know him, that is him who made heaven and earth and everything. Owusu, the teacher, followed up. How do you pray to him? The healers responded. When we go to our Abasum, we call him first because we know he's the elder, ruler, end quote. In Akan societies, hierarchies of settlements, custodianship of land, power, and authority rest on seniority. When asked, how do you serve him? The healers replied as before, but added this, quote, but when we go to our Abusum, then we worship him first and give him food before we bring him to the Abusum. The questions about God then hit a climax. Owusu asks, what names of honor do you give to God? The healers replied, we call him Onyankopon Kwame, the great gleaming one who is born on Saturday. So if creation commenced on a Saturday, it bears to reason that this day will be associated with a creative force. The healers continued naming the characteristics of this indeterminate force. Bore Bore, Aboadie, which is the creator of all things. Totorobunsu, the one who creates plentiful rain. Omusu, giver of rain. Omoia, giver of light. Odomankuma, benefactor of multitudes. Anansi Kokro, the great spider. Tridiampong, the tree which, when leaned against, does not break. These are all the braniers or praise names that they just went one after the other about this cosmic determinate force, which some people call God. We can draw, therefore, two conclusions about this multidimensional force and its atomization into multitudes of spiritual representatives. First, Onyame was a multifarious and unfixed creative force, where honorifics and adjectives spelled out how the Akom perceived it. In turn, ritual practices built around spiritual forces, accessible through nature, made the experience of these forces possible. I want to pause here for a moment and go sort of off script. I noticed that when the Obusum or Komfo is in spiritual communion, what people tend to call trance, they ritualistically play out life and death. In a sense that when the spiritual force enters the body now has two consciousness in one body. By physics, that's impossible. But obviously, by experience, that's very possible. Secondly, when that life force exits, the healer tends not to remember the details of the experience. So each quote-unquote possession, the healer experiences life and death. Each possession. They experience Onyankopon Onyame. Each moment. Second conclusion. If we're to believe that, quote, God was finished with the creation of the world, he brought the Abasum to the earth so that they would be representatives and judges, then the Abasum are a representation of real and historicized forces. In other words, they're not fetish. Organic materials of the earth form the canvas from which shrines were made and technologies for engaging the Abasum, such as clay or brass vessels, ayawa. And some of you may know that clay vessels were used before the brass vessels were imported from the north through the Mande traders. Clay vessels were used as the holders for these physical shrines. Clay pots or earthenware vessels, kukua, or a cluster of medicines formed around a wooden club, akonti. In this world of coexistence, healers lived and worked in a partnership using all the available tools, including the abusum, a term originating from, quote, the tree word sombor, meaning something of value. The abusum, quote, were heavy and people valued them. In other words, the term abusum does not mean worshiper of stone. It's from the inflected noun sombor, meaning something of value. As the creative force infinite manifestation, so too are the Abasum in their reproduction, classified by their point of origin and the day they reveal themselves. And therefore, it would appear then that the creative force revealed itself on Saturday, on Yom Kippur Kwame, the earth on Thursday, or if you're in the northern part, on Friday, Asasiya. And the two thus considered in conjugal terms, that is, quote, the earth is invoked always after God and before the Abasum because she is God's wife who produces everything that God desires. And this conjugal relationship is reproduced among the Abasum themselves. So for instance, Takura, which is considered to be the father of all Tano River Bosum, his quote-unquote wife is Afur Kankra. And Kankra is a town that is about 4 miles from Tanabwasi, where Takura is located in the Techiman region. So therefore, terms like wife and father stood for specific relationships as well as seniority among masculine and feminine understandings of spiritual forces. And the next stanza, and this is, by the way, this is a photo of the Busumpi of Takura. Here, this is the shrine of Takura, very large. It's about maybe this big. Yes, humongous. No one carries it, by the way. They'll break their neck. At the very base, they use Achekosia as the Ochami for Takura. And Ratchet took this picture in 1923. You can see here. And I've been to this particular place. It looks pretty much the same as it did in the 20s. And so in this next stanza, Kofi Donko invokes these same Tano-derived forces. Abana Hene, which is a reference to Tamensa, which is the primary Bosum for Techiman. Chumpuduo, Takura, Abanam Tanu, and the like. And in this, folks, Ratri also recorded this very ancient story that will kind of put these pieces together. And he called this sort of the basis of Asante theological beliefs. And again, in the story that Tano Takura is considered the first offspring or child of Onyame. And then there is Bosum Tree, the lake near Kumasi. Then there's River Bia, which actually meanders into what is now Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast. Then there is Po, or Abusum Po, which is the ocean or the sea. And so Tano is the only river taking its origin in Ghana and meets into the Atlantic Ocean at the Abe Lagoon. And along the path were not only gold-producing areas, hence the Gold Coast, but it was also along the path where Motus of Takora's offspring or children populated the entire Ghanaian landscape. And these Tano Busum are recognized by the prefix Ta, meaning Tano, as in Takofi, Takwesi, Takwajo, and so on and so forth. I'm going to move along a bit here, folks. This is the heart of the heart of the Tano River in Techiman. It is protected by the only indigenous Busum Rafo, that is Busum Rafo, called Obochirawa. It's at the mouth of the Tano River in Techiman, and this is down by the rocks, and so you can't see it here, but the Tano River is right here. And so the mouth of the river comes out of these rocks in Techiman. It's in a village called Tra, T-R-A-A. And these are some of the elder folks by there. And that river, again, meanders all the way down to the Abe Lagoon and into the Atlantic Ocean. And this is the Kronchihene of Tanoboase, Pouring Libation Takora. This is in Takora's cave. So this is actually the real shrine for Takora. And only select people go to this cave and do this ritual annually. You can see the egg on top, up there. And it's remarkable because the Bono people, that is, these Akan peoples who live in this Techiman area, their stories of origins that they came from a cave called Amoe, right, in a place called Yefri, not far from Pinihi in Kuranza today. And so caves and rock shelters were crucial for the earliest Akan peoples that came to occupy the dense tropical forests. And this is why Takora's shrine remains in this cave. And there's a story I can tell you, but I'll skip that in the interest of time about that. And in this stanza here, Kofi Donko refers to one of the more ancient Abusum. I want to focus on Bukru, which is also known as Biakuru, builder of towns. Biakuru is, in fact, some argue, older than Takora. Biakuru, builder of towns, was the Busum which the Bono people took from the Amowe caves when they went to Yefri and Pinihi and then down to what became Tanoboase and therefore the rest of the Techiman region. And these Busum were referred to by the missionaries as Abusum Pong, that is great Abusum. I just want to share with you a quick description of these Abusum as they were described. The Abusum Pong were, quote, similar to God in every way. Thus they reside in the air, they are invisible, not tied to a place or space, almost omnipotent, constantly present, and they are immortal. Without God's will, they do neither good nor bad to the human beings, but they wait for his orders at all time. They favor most to take up their residence deep in the forest under large trees, in romantic regions, on rocky inclines, and in caves. End quote. So these were descriptions that the Akan people gave the missionaries in the early 20th century about these Abusum Pong. Pong is the suffix here meaning great, or large, but in this case meaning great. And so, as the Abusum were interpreters for Onyame, healers were interpreters for the Abusum. And in this line here, Kofi Donko references 3,330 traditional healers. This number is not meant to be exact or to be literal. You see, the number 3 has deep ritual significance. And the number 30 among the common people means that which is sufficient. And so, by invoking 3,330 healers, essentially Kofi Donko is calling attention to his healing vocation, but also drawing upon their collective wisdom and vantage point. And therefore, it brings us to the categories of healers, which there are 3 primary categories of healers. The first is the Adunsini, who specialize in urban medicines for diseases, and they create the Asumain, earning the nickname Sumani, and a reputation for being Aduriyefo, one who makes medicine. The term Adunsini refers to one who works with parts of a tree. Next category is the Okomfo. And the Okomfo was referred to as those that are wise and stand in exact contact with the Abosum's world. But the Okomfo were also described by the missionaries as private persons and usually traveling, morally imperfect, true deceivers. It's not me saying this. They were further described as being magic healers, often summoned from far away and taken into service by a village or family or some civic purpose, being their own bosses, leading a wild and boisterous life. I'm just reporting this. Certainly mobile, enterprising, and skilled in the arts of divination and medicine, most Akomfo actually serve their communities rather than self-interest. The root word of Akomfo is kom, a concept denoting hunger and connoting making revelations, in the sense that hunger created through fasting and meditation prepared the Akomfo to be saturated by a spiritual force. Through that spiritual force, revelations and healing for the public good were dispensed. Base of mission informants also considered the Akomfo and the Asafo to be immediate servants of the Abosum. The Asafo in Akuyapin being equivalent to the Obosumfo in Techiman. And this was the third and final category. These Asafo Bosumfo was an advocate for the public good, and they, in fact, were deemed to be at the same prestige as the ruler of the land. In fact, sharp contrasts were drawn between the Akomfo and the Bosumfo. Unlike the Akomfo, the Asafo Bosumfo did not prophesy and did not engage in much traveling. Moreover, they were described as an official person assigned to the sacrificial service and necessary spiritual actions, and chosen by the town, the village, or the family. The Asafo Bosumfo were respected people, as high in rank as the kings or the chieftains, but they act on behalf of their town and family for the common good. In other words, the Bosum, under their custodianship, belonged to the master clan, not the individual. And this is the key difference between the Akomfo and the Bosumfo and the Asafo, is that the Bosumfo, Asafo, their Bosum that they are custodians for belongs to their family, which means at any point the family can depose them and install someone else, chosen by the Bosum, of course. Whereas the Akomfo, as you see from some of the descriptions, I won't say they're deceivers by no means, but they're more freelancing. That is, they can move about without being hitched to a village or hitched to a family, and therefore they have a little bit more freedom. I will come back to this relationship a little bit later. Let's wrap this portion up. And so therefore, it's not surprising that the Bosumfo in Techiman has such reverence that the authority of the Bosumfo for Tamensa exceeds the authority for the Techiman Heni. It is remarkable. Nowhere else in the Akan homeland does the authority for the spiritual leader exceed the authority of the political leader. In Techiman, that is the case, which means that when it comes, for example, or we're actually called the Yam Festival, which is really the beginning of the Akan new calendar year, the Afet. It occurs usually between August and September. So by my reckoning of the calendar, there should be one, I think, later this month, when the new yam appears. And the new yam has to be fed to the Bosum first. And then the townspeople. Guess what? The Techiman Heni has to go to the Bosum via Tamensa and pay respects and humble himself. Now, This wouldn't happen in Asante, by the way. This would not happen in Kumasi. Because there's a certain deification of the Asante Hene, where in Techiman, the Busum takes priority. Why? Because it comes from this particular lineage, this conceptual world that I'm trying to lay out for us to engage a little bit later on. That said, let me move along to here. And so, wrapping up the Ghana portion of this talk, what's crucial is that how authority took shape in this way is the story of the Bono Kingdom, its capital Bonamanso, and its subsequent capital and independent power, Techiman. It is also the story of how communities arose around the source of tunnel-based spiritual forces brought from nature into human culture, and how specific matriarch clans, the Abusia, assumed custodianship over those primordial forces for the public good, and how the ontological world outlined thus far became the social Akan worlds. In other words, the scenario of finding primordial spiritual forces and founding settlements around them occurred and reoccurred as often as the path in the forest were crossed. The Abasum assumed, unsurprisingly, pivotal roles in the development of towns and villages. So much so that, if you look here at, this is the map of Techiman district, so you can see Tanabwase, Chubudom, Techiman, Tanoso, and so on, that at each point, and this is Techiman here, so there are about 4 or 5 roads, to Sunyani, to Wenchi, to Tamale. Actually, this is the Wenchi road here. That's the Sunyani. And this is to Inkuranza. That's the Wenchi road. Along each of the 5 roads, there is a Tano Busum that is the custodian, the guardian for the road, for the villages on the road, and for the other Abusum along that road. Essentially, what I'm saying to you all is that the lead taken by Akan societies comes from this notion and conception of divine order. And that divine order played itself out literally in the physical spacing and structure of society, down to the actual road that people walk and drive on a daily basis, to or from the market and the farm. And so, over time and through the forest, the offsprings of Takota migrated and settled with their human hosts and custodians. And what is not so provocative is that those Akan people who left their homelands from the 17th century onward, actually 16th century onward, they also migrated with these spiritual forces. This map here is just trying to share, broadly speaking, the numbers and the places for which these captive Africans left their homelands on this notoriously one-way voyage to the Americas between 1508 and 1888. That's about 4 centuries. And so you can see here in sort of the inner layer that places like Jamaica and certainly Cuba, Barbados, even the Spanish Caribbean, where the Africans from the Gold Coast, formerly known as the Mina Coast, they too were also being sent to the Spanish Americas. So there are people in the records that I've seen in Bogota, in Colombia, in Peru, that are known as Jose Mina or Joseph Mina. And the Mina then in 16th century denoted people only from the Gold Coast. They're also being trafficked to Europe, particularly to Spain, Portugal, and Italy in their thriving slave markets. But from the 17th century, they came largely through British registered vessels into the Caribbean, and of course into the United States proper. So we'll deal with that the diaspora portion of these migrations. I'll focus now on just 2 cases of Suriname and Jamaica. So these are the chronological years, and these are the regions from which these captive Africans were brought to Americas. Notice here from the Gold Coast that roughly in the 17th century, the numbers are small, and this is of course the recorded numbers. We don't have the numbers that obviously are unrecorded, but these are the recorded numbers. But look at this jump in the 18th century. Right, that they jump for Suriname because at this point, Suriname becomes a Dutch colony, formerly an English colony. There's a swap between New York and Suriname. formerly New Amsterdam. And, excuse me, get back here. Yeah, so Suriname jumps. And the Dutch, of course, they're at Elmina Fortress on the coastline. And so here you see a sizable Akan presence that will take shape in terms of the material culture, the arts, language. In fact, I found that, research in Suriname, the same tunnel in the Ghanaian homeland is found in the Suriname. It's referred to as Tando. And a Tridiampong is also invoked as well, among a range of vocabulary. If you read the Konadu book, I have a list of all the vocabulary that you can see there as evidence. But here you see the sort of numerical reality in Suriname. And of course, 47,000 eclipses what? Essentially, almost all other African regions except West Central Africa, as the Congo-Angola region. So in other words, the Akan has a sizable proportion here. And that will reflect itself in the culture in those regions. The same is true for Jamaica, 17th century. From the Gold Coast, meager. But look here in the 18th century, over 200,000. It's only surpassed by the Bight of Benin, the so-called former slave coast. That is what is now Togo, Benin, and maybe the western part of Nigeria. But sizable in Jamaica. Okay?
Spiral notebook.
What's that? So here are, just broadly speaking, some of the markers of culture that we can use to map out the Akan diaspora in the Americas, right? So the Akan people are defined by these shared cultural beings. Not saying they're exactly the same, but they're shared cultural features. One is language. The Akan language is not one or two. It's actually a composite language with these major variants. And this light, Asante tree, Bono tree, Fanti tree, and Akriapim tree. They're very slight. They're like DC English and New York English. They also share a calendar system called the Adadra 9. Literally 40 days, but really 42 days. But literally it's 40 days. And there are 9 cycles of the 42 days, which equals 376 in an afe or year. They all share that. They also share a similar socio-political order, the Abusia or the Matru clan, the Intoro or Patra clan, meaning the father's side of lineage, as well as in terms of settlement and community formation, the Akura, which is a village, the Kuro or Krum, which means literally inside the town, and of course the Omain, which is the polity, bigger political configuration, as in Asante mine or Techi mine. And some of these terms, in fact, you'll see them in the diaspora, where in Suriname, for instance, I found several Kwajo Krom, Kwasi Krom. Fourth, they also share a naming system, Kradin. And so they have male-female name, which many of you know for the days of the week. Kwasi, Kwabena, Akosia, and so on. And these are, in fact, one of the most remarkable features of the African diaspora in the Americas, whereby Akan names are the most widespread and ubiquitous names because of this distinct sounding phonetic value, but also because of what? Their so-called day name that are found in the Americas. And lastly, cosmology. This notion of this creative force, spiritual forces, and ancestors. These two will travel with these Akan forced migrants. In Jamaica, in 1678, Hans Sloanes, founder of the British Museum, and also reportedly cocoa, meaning the cocoa that you, chocolate milk and the like cocoa products, he patented. Yes, he did. He patented it and made a fortune. Think of Milo, or people in Nigeria call Milo. Anyway, Hans Sloanes recorded this song through a Mr. Baptiste, which I'm presuming is an African from Haiti, that would know the African languages being spoken. Hans Sloanes would know these languages. And so Mr. Baptiste is recording this music here. And there are 3 crucial registers. I mean, it's 3 crucial groups. There's the Angola referring to West Central Africa, right? Then there's the Papa referring to the Bight of Benin. Then there's the Kromanti, this very crude term, which is a fishing village, on the coast of Ghana, but it became the moniker, the trademark for identifying Akan-speaking peoples in the diaspora. And note it is the most longest, it's the richest. There's a story here. The first story is that in 1678, when Jamaica is being turned over from a Spanish colony to a British colony, the Africans were literally figuring out how to play together. In other words, they're figuring out how to work together. Say, hey, you're good at this political structure, you're good at war formation, you're good at medicines. They're figuring out literally how to play together. And it's caught on, it's recorded. It's recorded. But there's something else happening here. In the different registers, and you need not be a musical specialist to get through this. In the musical registers, the Akan are both playing together, but they're also playing by themselves. This will be crucial. And I'll get to the revolts in a moment. They're playing together, but they're also playing by themselves. I want to take a snippet from the Koromanti song. There are three sort of movements. This is the first movement, and probably the most crucial. This sheet music, this is what it sounds like. Played to a banjo, and I think there's a percussion involved. Listen carefully. This is what they were playing. So this is actually the sheet music actually played, and it's an instrumental. And some of you who are attuned to music may know that this is a 12/8 meter. What does that mean? I'll tell you in a moment. I want to share with you a sample of a Adwa song. Oh, let me go back there. Excuse me. Get back here. All right. Hopefully you got it now. Let's see. Here we go. This is by Abhinav Fuswa. Just listen to the beat. Ignore the song. Go back. I want you to hear it again. This is a 12/8 meter, which means that it is essentially, it is 4 beats in three sets. Right, 3 independent sets. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Yeah, now that has it. All right. The 12/8 meter is the most common meter in terms of musical production that's found in Atlantic Africa, from Senegambia down to Angola, Congo, Angola, which is 4,000 miles of coastline. It's the most common among all of them. It's also the most common that's found in Adwa music, in Kete music, the 12/8 rhythm, right? 4/3, sort of. And I'll share one more time. Make sure you all hear the similarities. Just count it. You hear it? You hear the 12/8, right? Yeah. 17th century, in Jamaica, among captive Africans. Right. But these folks also brought with them literally material culture. Hans Sloane's also included the instruments they found among these Africans there. And you can see a number of them that are very obvious. Forms of the tumpan drum and others. The abeng, of course, which is very familiar. Yes, yes, particularly in Charlestown, in Moortown, in Akom, these maroon villages. In fact, I think we met there again, didn't we? Yeah, I keep meeting. And so these instruments, of course, were found. So this will surprise you. This is the Akan Atumpai drum, which Hans Sloane's didn't find, but he planted her in Virginia in 1720, sent it to him as part of his collection in Virginia. This is what the music sounds like played on the Atumpai. Here. So you can imagine 1720s, the planters of Virginia didn't sleep well when they heard this. In Jamaica, Suriname, they didn't sleep well. In fact, this drum was on display at the British Museum. I think it was a few years ago. There was a big exhibit about the Akan drum. And these, of course, the tumpan drums, and of course the bell that are found are part of this trini, or this drum orchestra in the Akan homeland. And these are the variants. On the, I guess on my right, your left, these are the tumpan in Suriname, and these are those in Jamaica. And these are not historic, these are contemporary. And something else that I mentioned earlier on about the founding of villages, towns around the Abusum. This is a village, Moon village in Suriname. Notice this. This is the Onyamijia. That is this usually a calabash hollowed out. It has herbs, eggs, and other ingredients that some of you know very well. And this is the village in Suriname. This is the same calabash outside the Busumfe in Kwasi in Takora. This was taken in the 70s. I took this in 2002 or 3, thereabout. You can see them. Okay? And guess what? It was the hunter who became the Ohene, and his sister who became the Ohema. She would plant the Nyamedri in front of her compound. And that goes back to this notion of creation, involved in the creation of women first and then men. Because the Ohene is not the king in European monarchical terms. It's referring to the itchy body of the hunter. Because the hunter is the one who traverses land to find new territory. And so the phrase Ohene comes from the term Ohene comes from the phrase Nea Ohene. My body is itchy. How does your body get itchy? From going through the dense forest. Right? This is a maroon song, another place where we find Akan cultures in the Americas. This is a Jamaican version. And for those of you who are linked to a Daddy Kofi, this may sound familiar. This I recorded in Jamaica. This is a transcription. This is my translation. So this is my tree transcription and the translation in English of what they're saying, and you see it's a pretty close match.
I wasn't sure here which one, but I think it's the latter. But the rest is pretty clear about these folks. This is a Coromante song in Suriname. I don't have the music for, but here's my transcription of it. This is the original that came through Herskowitz, he and his wife. And this is my transcription in P and then my translation. So it is one who dances a comb and has not slept. One who dances a comb and has not slept. Spin yourself in a circle. Spin yourself in a circle. Guan spiritualist and the Khan spiritualist. Akomfo, I will come. The term for Guan spiritualist is Dede. And in Jamaica is a song called Dede Ankoma. And guess what is who are found in Latte? Guan speaking peoples. They too traveled. Here's another song from Jamaica. I don't have music for this, I didn't record it. But I did transcribe it. And the term Kung Fu, you also find it in Guyana, formerly British Guyana. It's a whole tradition built around Kung Fu. And in the Konadu book, I have much more about the Kung Fu, the dancing of the Kung Fu in formerly British Guyana, today Guyana proper. So this one is a Kung Fu Nyaba. When the Kung Fu has come, poor Nana Betty, poor Nana the elder will hear. A Kung Fu Nyaba, when the Kung Fu has come, Abena Nyaba, the Abena has come. Poor Nana Betty, poor Nana will hear. And throughout the Circum Caribbean, broader than Jamaica, and of course Suriname, yes. So beyond just the English-speaking territories, Nevis, Dominica, St. Kitts, Montserrat, Antigua, these were folks who were serving prison terms for apparently engaging in obia, which is an English corruption of the term obi, obia, obaye. And in the records you see obi in Suriname, you see obia in Suriname and in Jamaica, which is referred to by that is indeterminate force people can use in different directions. And in fact, at one point, obia was punishable by death. It was capital punishment in the British Caribbean. Obviously something to be feared. Grandfather. The idea here is that one of the remarkable features of the Akan diaspora in the United States is a naming tradition where children will be named after their fathers and grandfathers, and it's clearly Akan names. In fact, the same is true for the well-known 19th century entrepreneur and sailor, Paul Kofi. Paul Kofi's father was Kofi from Asante, right? And so we can see how these traditions of naming the children after these is again one of the remarkable features in the United States. This family of Kwajo and Tema lived in Williamsburg, South Carolina, but they had bank accounts at the Freedmen's Bank in Savannah and in New York in 1870, 1873. And this is how I found looking at the Freedmen's Bank records. Then there was the 44-year-old Kofi Coben, who was born in Darien, Georgia, actually who was from Darien, Georgia. He also followed this pattern of naming one of the three sons Kofi. But there were also women like Afia Johnson, Afia Grant, Alma Fields, and Alma Owens. And these women also formed part of the 19th century, early 20th century Akan diaspora in the United States. For instance, a 26-year-old Afia Johnson was married to Titus and had three siblings named Ole, Emma, and Kwabena. The last was named after their father, Kwabena Noble. Again, the same naming tradition. Afia Grant was 13 years older than Afia Johnson, but she too was born in Georgia. And by the turn of the century, Akan descendants like Kwabena Wells was also found in both the 1910 and 1920 U.S. federal census. That is the early 20th century. You find these Kwabenas and the like. Now, I wasn't able to find much more about their interior lives, but certainly the record suggests that it's not unimaginable that you can have a Kwabena noble in 1920 in Georgia, and then have a Yao Opana Deni Zulu 1930 in Augustus, Georgia. In fact, by the early 20th century, you had persons in New York, Harlem in particular, such as Chief Sam, as Alfred Sam, his father being Kwasi Sam from the then Gold Coast, who came to Harlem to look for African descendants who could in fact begin what was then termed the Back to Africa movement before Garvey. And a number of people went with Sam to Salt Pond, not far from Quartermontine, about 3 miles from Quartermontine, on the Gold Coast. Then you have the like of Nana Amor, who was legally named Kwamina Fawkes Tando. He too came to Harlem in the 1920s and 30s. In fact, he died of a brain disease in 1929 in Harlem. So not only do you have Akan descendants, but also Akan peoples who are in Harlem, who are in Brooklyn. In fact, in Brooklyn, New York, there was a chimp trading company. The Akan diaspora will have all the details, but these tidbits suggest that Nana Denny Zulu, as a metaphor, analogy, for diasporic Africans, they have the option, he had the option to choose among a range of African homelands and peoples, because Africanized people have the great benefit of being a composite of various African peoples. Just like in the Akan homeland, when the Akan peoples are really a composite of people from various parts of what is now known presently Togo, Ivory Coast, of course Burkina Faso, and further north. And how did you get into the Akan bloodline lineage? Through an Akan mother. Right? Yeah, through an Akan mother. That's how you authenticate it. And so, name, inheritance, rituals on your krada, all these came through your affiliation through your mother, rather than your father. And of course, the story of Nana Denny Zulu, which a number of you mentioned early on, it's certainly a story that we can talk about more. But Nana Denny Zulu, then, of course, he comes to Harlem, and along the way he meets Osurgiman, who, of course, he founds what becomes the sort of Yoruba resurgence in North America. He went to Matanzas, Cuba, and of course, we know a little bit of the story. Notice this in the story that Osurgiman is the Akan name. It means Ose Jemain. Ose, who saves the nation, or the father of the nation. Interestingly. Okay? And so, from Denny Zulu to Nana Parabia, we have what we have, this story. And so, I therefore, I guess want to sort of close here. Thank you all.
Information in there. He didn't bring any of his books. However, they are on Amazon. I think we have some in Barnes and Nobles. He has some cards out that he can give you. And he has like about 6 or 8 books out, but he has a lot of stuff out there.
I'll tell you this very quickly, if I may. These are just flyers for. We operate a nonprofit.
Yes, we operate a nonprofit publishing group called Diasporic Africa Press, and these flyers will kind of share with you some of the work that we have. The Akan Diaspora book, the second edition, will be out, I think, late this month, and it you can get it through. It's been published by a press. What I've been doing over the years is this. I know I'm being exploited by Oxford University Press and Duke. I know it is. It's a mutual pimping. And so, it is. It's what it is. There's no way I can work 7 years for a book and get paid 10%. And so what I've been doing is actually regaining fighting. I mean, literally going to Oxford, England to fight for my rights, for my work. And I got both, actually all of them back. And so I have new editions that I'm publishing through the press. Thank you. So it'll be available in the press. Always the price is low. All of our books, I think, are around $20, $25, no more, to make them accessible. And what we do is, whatever monies that are gained, we invest it into new books. And so the new book, the second edition, what we call Akom Pioneers. The subtitle is African Histories and Diasporic Experiences, and there I made some corrections, some adjustments, but there I think the story that you get, I think will be worth the read. So that you can get that through our site at theafricapress.com. I'll share this with you. I need it back. This is a program, Dana Opatabia's Going Home Party. I shared it around those of you that weren't there and didn't see it, if you don't mind. But please bring it back. I mean, please give it back to me.
It's for research. Keep research.
Good question?
Yes.
Yeah, let's take some questions. All right, let's, I'll run around the mic, I guess.
Okay. So in reference to the Virginia drum that you had talked about,
Yes.
yes. Was there any verification on the drum in terms of its origin? Was it made there on that plantation, or was it, as many historians are now claiming, that it was a drum brought from across the water to Virginia?
That's a great question. Can you all hear me? Okay.
That's a great question. I searched Hans Sloane's records, his letters and the like, and there's a small notation where he said he got the drum from a Virginia planter. It doesn't say in terms of provenance, which would be a question about, source of it. It's possible it was made in Virginia because of the wood, and I think, there we go. Yeah, I just go back. Right here. If you look at the wood, this is probably cedar, right? That's my guess. It's cedar. And if it is cedar, it's probably made in Virginia. Right? That's my just guess from the appearance of it. It could have been brought, and if it was, really remarkable because as we all know, that the Africans were compelled to dance to exercise. Right, it's a cool exercise along the Atlantic crossing. So it wouldn't be surprising that one did in fact come over, but I think the wood here is not the wood used, certainly in the Ghana homeland. Right. So it looks like cedar to me, and that suggests, which is remarkable because look at the exactness. I mean, that's remarkable. And that's why when these folks talk about these empty-headed Africans, that they came without material culture, they had ideas, they had memories. Yeah.
Thank Dr. Konadu, that was excellent. One of the things I would encourage people, one of the benefits of living in the South Washington, D.C. area, there's a lot of plantations, and I would encourage people, wherever you find a plantation, go visit it, really go visit it. At Mount Vernon, George Washington's plantation, in there are African drums hanging on the wall, hanging from the ceiling. Yeah. Other thing is, my mother's family from Antigua. And my daughter and I had fun one day looking through the Antiguan phone book. Most of the last names in Antigua are Akan Day names. Yeah.
And folks, now, not a problem. I'm glad you said that because I thought I was the only weird one. When I visit these places like the Bahamas and Jamaica, I look through phone books. I do that.
It's fun, but but I think it's fun. My wife's called me a nerd, but I take it as a compliment. But if you look through these phone books, what you'll see are these Akan names, Kwamina, Kwasi, referring to Kwasi and others. I mean, they're right throughout in the phone books. So if you next vacation, just look at the phone book. If they still have them, I don't know if they have them anymore. People go digital.
Will a copy of this lecture be available on CDs or anything like that?
I don't know.
That means no.
I mean, I can get a copy of it. We recorded it, but I don't know what it looks like. But if we could, definitely.
I believe it should be for the sake of those who come after us and what we did here today. It would be good history.
Anybody else?
In 1988, Oba Sam had me go to Jamaica. And while I was in Jamaica, Atari Kofi claimed the Maroons. And for a week, we got there on a Monday, caught hell. But on Wednesday, he came and said he's gonna have an Akom. On that Friday, there was an Akom up there, and everybody was fed. So now, it all makes sense. It didn't make sense before, but it makes sense now. So it's just ironic, because Oba Sam said he's from there, and his family was from Charleston, South Carolina. And he was a Maroon. And basically my grandmother was a Maroon. That's how it just came together just now. Thank you.
Anybody else?
In South Carolina, particularly the Low Country, had a lot. In fact, Africans were always in the majority in the Low Country in South
He
Carolina.
told me what family he belonged to, and I saw it on South Carolina had a slave museum.
Yeah.
I went to the slave museum, and there it was. I didn't need a picture because I respected. Please don't take no pictures. Somebody else said, "Take pictures, the hell with it." I couldn't do that. But it's just amazing how it took 25 years now to come back and realize. So that's why that's like that.
Let's give Dr. Konadu another round of applause. Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate you. We're going to break. We're going to have setting up for lunch.
Can I quickly?
Sure. So I guess after this comments, we'll break, set up for lunch, and then we'll come back here and we'll eat, and then at 1 o'clock we'll go into our breakout session. The priest meeting is in this room. All right.
Folks, if I may just take 2 minutes of your time, maybe less. He's not here, but I wanted to sort of make some of these connections that essentially my connection to Techiman, Ghana, and his research came through my maternal grandfather, who was an herbalist in Jamaica. They call him Bush Doctor. I remember as a young child, he used to give me these baths, and I remember all the ingredients. He used to give us these baths to keep away these evil spirits and other things. He took me to the ocean ritual with eggs. I never understood what he was doing, but I was around all this. But I want to at least just quickly see if I can. How do I minimize this? Let's see. That's what was it for this round? Just the
That's an H channel.
That's the song you were singing.
Go ahead and talk it out.
can it be screen?
Can you see? Because the light, you can't see. Can you turn on, have the guy turn on the lights, Okoshua? So you can get a better idea what it looks like. You just can't see it that good.
That's it?
See the gray, most of it out here, but it's dark here too.
Excuse me, can you all see this? Okay, wonderful.
It's even better here.
Yeah, so just 2 minutes, folks. I appreciate your patience. So, to kind of bring the story full circle, the folks you see here are, this is Nana Ifa. This is Nana Ifa. And he's the one with whom Nana Kwaku Senchi in Florida wrote to in contact, looking for Nana Kofi Donko, which is behind him. This is Nana Kwaku Senchi's kunkuma, his sort of graduation ceremony. And their cutting is here, the Pesi. And this is Nana Kofi Abor. He's the Achami for it all. So my encounter with Techiman came through Nana Kwaku Senchi in Florida. And but my encounter with Nana Kwaku Senchi came through Nana Kwabena Brown. And by then, these folks had passed, but of course, Nana Kwaku Senchi wrote to him, Anaifa, who put him in contact with his father, Nana Kofi Donko, who was his primary trainer, including Nana Akumsa and others. Nana Kofi Abor was one of my teachers and trainers. All these folks have since passed. Nana Kwaku Senchi is with us in Miami. Next one, please.
Go ahead and narrate it. Blow it up.
Sure. Well, this is a photo of Nana Ya Mensa. And Ya Mensa was one of my teachers. He recently passed. And of course, Nana Kwaju and others had met him. This is Nana Kofi Donko's wife, Afia Munufie. She has since passed as well. This is for Nana Ya Mensa during his training. This is the yawa that's put on the head. And this is the pad called the kashire that's in between. So the Busumfos in Techiman, they, in order to carry the Busum, the physical shrine has to be on top of their heads, cushioned by the kashire. And so I wanted to share at least that portion with you, which I didn't have a photo of during the presentation. Next one, please. And, okay, it's still working. Okay, we can work with this. That's fine. Yeah. So this is the yawa. This is mine, and here we use shide, the clay taken from a river, to paint the sort of the face of the busum on the yawa on the pad. And of course, the physical shrine is inside, and you find this all throughout the Techiman region with those who have these yawa. And of course, each sacred day on the Dajunai, in our case, is Kwabena. For others, it may be Monuuku or other days. They would actually have, sacrifices, and they will repaint this. They'll clean the shrine with a number of plants, ninya and others that are used, dufure, and so on. And lastly, last one, please. Again, I couldn't do this in the talk because I didn't have the image with me. But here, yeah, last few. So here, these are the tools of divination. We can use the asuya, which many of you are familiar with, but we are also taught to use the sidie, which are here, and these are other tools that are used, pieces of gold, coin, etc. And the divinations is used on the skin of an animal, the antelope, called otri. So these are some of the tools of the trade that the Busumfo uses. And here, next photo, please. Thank you. Yeah, blurry picture. But this is Nadia Mensa, my main teacher, and this is Anakwaku Ifa. He's young, relatively young man. He and I trained together, but he's now the Busumfo Heni for Techiman. So he's the Busumfo for Tamensa. Very, very nice guy. We're studying plants in Kintampo South, studying plants together. And this is yours truly. Yeah, last one, please. Yeah. I look much younger than.
Hey, shut up.
Yeah, it's the last one right here. Yes, and just wanted to give a shout out of respect to, this is not a Kofi boy, he's since passed, but he was one of my, again, main trainers. This is the same one who was the Ochami for Kofi Donko. And we're eating corn together. It's one of several rituals in Kukuma. He was my, actually, I don't pick favorites, but he was one of my beloved. He and Nana Kuya Santua, who since passed away too. Nana Kwabena Brown knows all these folks. And so I just wanted to share these as a way to pay respects to these ancestors who were crucial to my life and to many other people and who have all transitioned, since started this research. So thank you all, folks.
Okay, thanks again. We have some handouts on the tables that's asking you questions about the session. So please kindly fill them out to just give us some response and some feedback so we can make this better for the next time around. All right?
Yes.
It goes back to the drum. When they legalized the drum, how did that drum sustain itself as far as surviving the legalization of our drums?
In the United States or
in the United States? In the United States.
That's a tough question. My educated guess would be in the Maroon. Thank you.
That's a good question. My educated guess would be in the Maroon communities, in the swamps of Virginia, in the hills of Georgia. In fact, there's a pretty decent book about history of Maroons in the United States by Sylviane Diouf.
Hold on. Let me
Sure. Her name is Sylviane, Sylvaine, I think. Diouf. She's a Wolof name in Senegal. Diouf. She works at the Schomburg Center in Harlem.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. She's well known. But it's the history of Maroons in the United States. It's a decent book. But she talks about these Maroon communities in general sense. But my guess would be in those Maroon communities where there's more relative autonomy for these kinds of cultural productions to continue. Same as in the Maroon communities in Suriname and Jamaica and French Guiana and other places. By the way, there's some interesting stories. I won't burn the arrow, but the Maroons in Suriname were in conversation with the Maroons in Brazil. And I was doing another project. I read Portuguese, and so if you do as well, I can share the sources with you. Yeah. And there were discussions between the Maroons in Dutch Suriname and in the border between Brazil. And the people are going back and forth between these Maroon communities. I mean, it's fascinating in terms of these possibilities between the inter-Maroon communities.
Was that what that movie was about, Quilombo?
Not really, because Quilombo was more so, Palmares, referring to Palmares, right. So that was more so in this hilly mountain in Pernambuco, which is towards the coast.
Oh, okay.
This is more inland towards Dutch Suriname, right, going towards the west.
You mentioned...
I know he's trying to break.
All right, everybody want to ask questions now, right?
Gave us some more, so we got more questions.
Yeah.
That last picture that you showed, that was your graduation? Or
Yeah.
From what and when?
When was this? I'm trying to remember how it was.
It was some years ago.
10, 15?
I'm trying to remember. It must have been 10 years. Yeah, it must have been 10 years. And the ceremony is called Kukuma. And there's a lot involved. It happens over several days. Nana Sachi has some wonderful photos of his Kukuma on his website. His website is Akompan Adepa. AKOMPANADE.org. Akompan Adepa. He has a lot of photos of his Kukuma as well, which you can kind of use as some reference point.
Okay.
The other question.
The system that you're involved with.
Well, I have the Mitano Busum, which is Asabonteng Mensa. So Mensa meaning third board. So the third iteration, like Ta Mensa. but it's coming from the tunnel soon.
All right, thanks again, brother. This was wonderful. Thank you.